The first time she crossed my lawn, I thought it was an accident. The second time, I realized it was a message. Karen Blake, Maple Creek's self-appointed queen bee and president of the HOA, didn't just walk across my grass. She marched through it, clipboard in hand, heels stabbing into the soft soil like she was marking her territory. Her perfume lingered behind her like smoke, a mix of gardenia and arrogance. I was trimming the edge of my driveway when I saw her. Perfect posture, sunglasses glinting, the morning sun catching that smug little smirk she wore like armor. She stopped mid-lawn, looked down at the sprinklers I'd just installed, and sighed as if the sight personally offended her. "Mr. Carter," she called, voice dripping with that HOA honeyed authority. "You do know the community path ends at the sidewalk, right?" I wiped sweat from my forehead and said evenly, "You do know that's my lawn, right?" She blinked, tilting her head as if I'd spoken another language. Then she smiled, tight and polished. "Technically, all shared-facing greenery falls under HOA jurisdiction. We just want to make sure it's up to standard." "Up to standard?" I echoed, glancing down at the emerald carpet I'd spent every weekend perfecting. "Karen, my lawn could be in a magazine." She tapped her clipboard. "It could also be non-compliant. I'll make a note." And with that, she strutted off, heels sinking into the damp soil again, leaving behind deep impressions like scars across the grass. That was the first time. The second time, she brought friends. 2 other board members, her little entourage, followed her like ducklings, pretending to inspect fences and hedges, whispering and pointing. One of them even laughed when Karen accidentally stepped on a sprinkler head and cracked it. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. Because in neighborhoods like Maple Creek, words weren't power, evidence was. Before I tell you what I did next, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. Because if you've ever had a neighbor like this, you're going to want to see how it ends. The next morning, a bright yellow envelope was taped to my front door. Notice of property maintenance violation. Lawn edging inconsistent with community aesthetics. Fine, $150. Signed, Karen Blake, HOA president. I stared at that paper, reading it twice. My edging was perfect, every line laser straight. But then I noticed the small print. Complaint submitted by resident observation. Resident observation. That meant her. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was flexing control. The thing about me is, I don't do well with bullies. I'm an engineer by trade. Precision is my language, patience my weapon. So while most people would have stormed in her office and yelled, I decided to do something far more effective. I started documenting. Every footprint, every violation, every smug little act of entitlement. By the end of the week, I had 3 video clips of her walking through my yard at different times of day. In one, she even stopped to pick a flower from my border plants, then tossed it onto the pavement when she saw me watching. That was when I realized this wasn't just about grass. This was about control. Karen needed to feel untouchable, needed to prove she could rewrite the rules and everyone would fall in line. And unfortunately for her, she picked the wrong neighbor to test that on. So I started planning. It began with a blueprint, literally. I sat in my garage one evening, surrounded by old schematics from my contracting days, and drew up a layout. My goal wasn't destruction. It was exposure. I wanted her to reveal herself, to show the entire neighborhood exactly who she really was. The trick was subtlety. If you go to war with the HOA, you don't start with dynamite. You start with patience, pressure, and proof. 2 nights later, I installed a new sprinkler system, one with motion sensors and Wi-Fi controls. Every time someone stepped onto my grass uninvited, a camera would snap on, and a gentle mist would rise from the ground. Innocent, right? But there was a twist. Each sprinkler had a built-in indicator light. When triggered, the water shimmered blue. So, the next time Karen decided to take her royal stroll, the whole neighborhood would see it. I didn't have to wait long. It was Saturday morning, birds chirping, kids riding bikes, everything picture perfect. Then came the telltale click of Karen's heels on concrete. I turned on my phone and opened the live feed. There she was, walking across the lawn like she owned it, clipboard in one hand, latte in the other. She didn't even see the sprinkler heads adjust. Then, click, a line of water arced up around her, glittering blue in the sunlight. She screamed, a sharp, indignant sound that could have shattered glass. The clipboard flew into the air, her latte exploded across her blouse, and every neighbor within view turned to stare. For a split second, she froze, then glared straight at my security camera. Her lips moved, slow and deliberate. "You'll regret this." I just smiled at the screen. Already documented. By evening, I had 3 voicemails from her, escalating in tone, from condescending to furious to borderline threatening. The last one ended with, "You've made an enemy of the HOA, Mr. Carter. We'll see how long that smug little smile lasts." And I realized then, she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. So I started the next phase. If she wanted a war over property lines, she was about to learn something. When an engineer draws a line, he makes sure it's permanent. The morning after the blue sprinkler incident, I expected Karen to come knocking, clipboard in hand, ready to lecture me on community conduct. But the knock never came. Instead, I woke up to silence, the kind that hums with tension. Even the birds seemed to sense it. I brewed my coffee, opened the blinds, and found a small yellow envelope pinned to my mailbox. Notice of aggressive behavior toward board members. Fine, $250. I laughed, out loud, right there in the kitchen. Aggressive behavior? The only thing I'd done aggressively was water my lawn. That's when I realized Karen wasn't retreating. She was regrouping. The kind of person who thrives on control doesn't give up. They escalate. So I decided to escalate too. But my version of escalation didn't involve shouting or lawsuits. Mine involved data, patience, and precision. 3 things Karen had no defense against. I started by building what I called Project Boundary. Over the next few days, I mapped every inch of my lawn and installed tiny pressure sensors under the turf, linked to my motion-sensing sprinkler system. Each time someone stepped onto my property, the system would log the exact timestamp, direction of movement, and video clip. I wasn't protecting grass. I was building a digital fence made of proof. On the 4th morning, I caught her. At 6:47 a.m., Karen's familiar silhouette appeared on the camera feed. She wasn't alone this time. 2 HOA members trailed behind her, both carrying clipboards. They whispered, gestured toward my mailbox, and then, like it was some secret operation, stepped onto my lawn again. The sprinklers didn't trigger this time. I disabled them for the day. I didn't need another spectacle. I needed evidence. Karen pointed at my security cameras, muttering something to her companions, then knelt down and pulled something from her purse, a small toolkit. She tried to unscrew the sprinkler head. I froze, watching from my living room, jaw tightening. She wasn't inspecting, she was tampering. I hit record. She gave up after a few minutes, probably realizing the bolts were sealed. Then she walked off, muttering, leaving the sprinkler crooked but intact. 5 minutes later, I sent the footage to my lawyer friend, Mason, who worked downtown. He called me back almost immediately. "You're telling me the HOA president trespassed, damaged your property, and left evidence? Got it all on camera. Keep recording. Don't confront her yet. We'll let her hang herself with her own clipboard." That advice stuck, because I could feel the storm building, and storms, I'd learned, don't need interference. They destroy themselves. That evening, I decided to push the boundary a little further, literally. See, our HOA had a rule about decorative landscaping. Any aesthetic additions must maintain visual cohesion with community design standards. It was one of those vague phrases Karen loved, because it meant she decided what cohesive meant. So I gave her something to judge. The next morning, my front lawn had a brand new addition. A small, handmade wooden sign, neatly carved and stained. It read, "Private property. Do not enter. Violators will be watered." It was tasteful, funny, and completely legal. Neighbors started laughing when they passed by. Kids pointed. Someone even snapped a picture and posted it on the community Facebook page. Within an hour, it had 100 reactions, most of them laughing emojis. Karen, of course, was not amused. That afternoon, her silver SUV rolled up to my curb. She didn't even get out at first, just sat there, glaring from behind her tinted window. Then, finally, the door opened. She marched across the street, red heels clicking like gunfire. "Mr. Carter," she said, forcing a brittle smile. The HOA would like to discuss your sign. Of course, I said, sipping my coffee. What seems to be the issue? It's, well, non-compliant. It conveys hostility. Hostility? Karen, it's a joke. Community guidelines prohibit signage that implies threat or intimidation. I raised an eyebrow. So no beware dog signs, either? That's different, she snapped. Those are for safety. And this one's for trespassers, I said lightly. Safety goes both ways. Her smile vanished. I'll be reporting this to the board. Perfect, I said. Be sure to include the part where you trespassed again this morning. Her eyes flickered. She hadn't realized I knew. That tiny slip, that flinch, was worth every fine she'd sent me. The next week was quiet, eerily so. No fines, no letters, no visits. But I could feel something coming. Karen wasn't done. She was planning something bigger, and I needed to be ready. So I decided to set the real trap. It started with a rumor. A neighbor named Jim, retired teacher, kind guy, stopped by one evening, coffee thermos in hand. Heard from friend on the board. He said, Karen's planning an inspection blitz. They're going to hit every problem house next week. Yours is at the top of the list. An inspection blitz? He nodded. She's calling it a community compliance sweep. Wants to make an example out of somebody. Let me guess. I said, that somebody's me. Jim gave a rueful grin. She hates losing control. Be careful, Marcus. I nodded and decided to give her exactly what she wanted, a reason to show up uninvited. That weekend, I set up what looked like a renovation project. Stacks of lumber, a few tools, some fencing panels, all perfectly legal, all inside my property line. But to Karen's prying eyes, it would look suspicious, maybe even non-compliant. And right beside it, I installed one final piece of tech, a motion-triggered camera hidden inside a decorative garden lantern. Unlike the others, this one had audio recording too. If she trespassed again, I'd have sound and footage. By Monday, the bait was set. Tuesday morning, 8:12 a.m., the camera caught her again. This time, she didn't come alone. She brought 2 HOA members and, of all people, her husband, Derek. I didn't know much about him, except that he worked with the city's zoning office, which suddenly made all those conveniently approved HOA projects make sense. They huddled by my fence, talking in low voices. Karen pointed to the lumber pile. Derek shook his head. Then, unbelievably, she climbed through the fence gate. The others hesitated, whispering, but she waved them off and strutted in like she owned the place. I watched from my living room window, phone in hand, every second recorded. She circled my tools, peered into my storage bins, then, without hesitation, snapped photos. That's when I stepped outside. Morning, President Blake, I said evenly. Doing another inspection? She startled, but recovered quickly. Just ensuring compliance. A resident reported unapproved construction. Really? And did that resident happen to share your last name? Her nostrils flared. This will be reported. Oh, I'm sure it will, I said, nodding toward the lantern camera blinking red. So will this. Her head whipped toward the light, realization dawning too late. For the first time, I saw fear flicker behind her eyes. Not much, but enough. Enjoy your day, Karen, I said quietly. You've just inspected yourself into a corner. She stormed off, muttering, her husband following close behind, face pale as chalk. That evening, I reviewed the footage, clear as day, with audio. Her voice saying, no one will ever prove it. It was gold. I sent it to Mason, who called back with barely restrained glee. Marcus, this isn't just HOA harassment anymore. It's trespassing, abuse of authority, and if her husband's zoning work is tied to this, that's corruption. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Karen had built her little empire on fear and control. But now, I had something she couldn't control, truth. And the moment I decided to use it, Maple Creek would never look the same again. By Wednesday morning, the footage was already backed up in 3 places, my cloud, a hard drive, and Mason's office downtown. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was preparing for war. But war in Maple Creek didn't look like bullets and fire. It looked like paperwork, meetings, and whispers through hedges. When I left for work that day, Karen's SUV wasn't outside. That should have comforted me, but it didn't. Because when a person like her goes quiet, it isn't peace, it's plotting. Sure enough, by noon, I got an email from the HOA board. Subject: urgent, violation notice and property review. It stated that I was under investigation for unauthorized modifications and threatening signage. They'd scheduled a special hearing for Friday night. Of course they had. Karen's power move turned the victim into the villain. I forwarded the email to Mason, who called me instantly. "Don't respond," he said. "Let them dig their own grave. Just bring your evidence to the meeting and keep that footage safe." So I did. I kept my head down, smiled at my neighbors, and waited. But I could tell word was spreading. People I barely knew nodded at me, whispered things like, "Heard you're standing up to her." Even a mailman gave me a knowing grin. By the time Friday rolled around, the air in the neighborhood buzzed with something new: curiosity. The HOA clubhouse was packed. Folding chairs lined the walls, people spilling into the hallway. It felt less like a hearing and more like a trial, with the whole community watching. Karen sat at the center table, posture perfect, a small stack of folders in front of her. Derek sat in the back, avoiding eye contact. The other board members looked nervous, fidgeting with pens and notepads. I walked in with one folder and one USB drive. She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Mr. Carter, thank you for joining us. We'll begin promptly. You've been accused of—" "Actually," I interrupted, "I think it's only fair everyone here hears both sides first." Karen's smile faltered. "This isn't public hearing, right? Community transparency?" I said, quoting the HOA bylaws she'd written herself. "Let's make it transparent." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Paul, the vice president, cleared his throat. "Proceed, Mr. Carter." I plugged the USB. The big screen on the wall flickered to life. The room went silent. The first clip played, Karen, at dawn, stepping onto my lawn with her toolkit. Her voice, clear as day. "If I loosen the valve, he won't even notice till it floods." The crowd gasped. Next clip, her inspection, climbing through my gate with Derek, taking photos of my property. Then the final one, her words echoing through the speakers. "No one will ever prove it." The silence afterward was thick enough to choke on. Karen's face went white. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Derek stared at the floor, looking like he wanted to melt through it. I turned to the board. "So, am I still the one being investigated?" Mason, sitting quietly in the back, nodded at me. "Time for knockout." "I've also forwarded this footage to the city zoning office," I said, "since Mr. Whitmore here appears to be inspecting private property while acting in an official capacity. That's not just an HOA violation. That's conflict of interest." Paul's eyes widened. "Wait, Derek, is this true?" Derek stammered. I was just helping her." Karen slammed her folder shut. "This is manipulation." He edited. I raised my phone and tapped play again. The same audio echoed through the room, unedited, uncut. Her own voice, her own words. People started whispering, louder this time. Some angry, some amused. One woman near the back muttered, "She's been doing this for years." Another man said, "Finally, someone caught her." Karen stood up, trembling with fury. "You think this proves anything? You violated my privacy. You're all complicit." "Sit down, Karen," Paul said quietly. That single sentence, from her own board member, was the loudest sound of the night. Her authority cracked right there. She froze, staring at him like he'd just betrayed her. And in a way, he had. The crowd's mood shifted. The same people who once nodded obediently now looked at her with suspicion. I leaned back, calm. I didn't break any rules. I protected my property. You, on the other hand, I gestured toward the screen, broke several. For the first time since moving into Maple Creek, I felt the power dynamic flip. She wasn't untouchable anymore, just a person cornered by her own arrogance. The board voted right there. Karen Blake, suspended from her position pending investigation. When I walked out of that clubhouse, the air felt different. Lighter. Neighbors who'd avoided me for months clapped me on the shoulder, smiling. Someone even whispered, "About time someone took her down." But as I reached my driveway, a strange unease crept in. Because people like Karen, they don't vanish quietly. They regroup. That night, around 11:30 p.m., I got a motion alert on my phone. My heart skipped. I opened the camera feed, and there she was, standing on the sidewalk, just staring, not moving, not yelling, just watching my house in the glow of the streetlight. It was eerie, like a ghost that hadn't accepted it was dead yet. I stepped onto the porch, keeping my phone recording. "Something I can help you with, Karen?" She didn't flinch. "You ruined my life," she said softly. "You think this is over? Go home, Karen." Her lips curled. "You'll regret crossing me." Then she turned and walked off into the dark. The next morning, I found another envelope on my porch, unmarked. Inside was a photo of my lawn camera, printed on glossy paper. Underneath, in red ink, "Two can play this game." I stared at it for a long time, feeling that old mix of anger and adrenaline. She wasn't done, but this time neither was I. By Monday, the HOA scandal had exploded. The footage leaked online, making its way into local community forums. People from other neighborhoods started chiming in, stories about Karen's audits, her fines, her intimidation tactics. The board called an emergency meeting, this time without her. By Tuesday morning, she'd been officially removed. But that didn't stop her from stirring the pot. Rumors spread that she was planning a lawsuit. Others said she'd gone to the county to appeal her removal. I didn't care. I'd spent enough time reacting. It was time to finish this once and for all. I called Mason. "How much trouble can she still cause?" "Depends," he said. "If she tries to file a harassment claim, you've got the footage to counter it. But if she's using her husband's connections, that's corruption, and the city loves cleaning that kind of mess publicly. Then maybe it's time they had a reason to." We spent the next few days compiling everything. The trespassing clips, the inspection footage, even the anonymous envelope. Mason sent it to his contact at the local paper. By Friday morning, the headline hit: HOA president and city official under investigation for abuse of power. Karen's picture, mid-argument, face red, was right under it. That evening, her SUV disappeared from her driveway. For the first time in months, my street was quiet. Peaceful, but I knew better. Peace in Maple Creek didn't last long, especially when pride was still wounded and power still smoldered. And sure enough, one final storm was coming. I thought it was over. For a week, the neighborhood was silent, unnervingly so. No letters, no cameras knocked over, no passive-aggressive notes about property uniformity. Then on a Thursday night, I heard it. A click, that sharp, deliberate click of a gate latch opening. My phone buzzed a second later, motion alert. I swiped it open, and my blood ran cold. There she was, Karen, in a black hoodie this time, her face half covered by the shadow of the fence light. She wasn't alone. A man followed behind her, tall, broad, moving like someone who'd done this before. She'd brought help. I muted my phone's volume and zoomed in on the feed. They were walking along my property line, flashlights sweeping the grass. The man knelt down near one of my posts, my concrete boundary markers, and started digging. It took me 3 seconds to process it. They were trying to remove them. I hit record, switched cameras, and called Mason on speaker. He answered on the second ring. "Tell me you're not seeing what I think you're seeing." "Oh, I'm seeing it," I said quietly. She brought muscle this time. "Stay inside," he warned. "You've already won legally. Don't engage. Just get proof." But watching someone violate your property like that, again, it does something to you. It twists something in your chest until the logical part of your brain starts to flicker. I put on my jacket, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped outside. The moment the beam hit them, Karen froze like a deer. "Evening, Karen," I said, voice calm. "Back for another inspection?" The man stood, shovel in hand. "You need to go back inside." I tilted my head. "I don't think so. You're on private property." Karen's eyes gleamed. "Correction, disputed property. Not according to the county," I replied. "Or the police. Or the court." She smirked. "You think that little article made you invincible? You humiliated me. You cost me everything. You did that yourself." The man took a step forward. I raised my phone higher, letting the red light from the camera blink clearly in the dark. "Every word you say," I told him, "is being recorded. You might want to remember that before you take another step." He stopped cold. Even in the dim light, I saw him glance at Karen. That quick, uncertain flicker in his expression that said this wasn't part of the deal. Karen hissed, "Let's go." But before she could move, I said, "Already called the sheriff." I hadn't. Yet. But bluffing's a language of its own. She froze, eyes darting to the street. "You're bluffing." I smiled. "Guess you'll find out in about 3 minutes." She cursed under her breath and stormed off, dragging the man with her. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs, watching her SUV peel out of the cul-de-sac, taillights vanishing into the dark. And then, for the first time since this began, I felt something shift. Not just fear or anger, but resolve. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about making sure she couldn't hurt anyone else again. The next morning, I went straight to the county sheriff's office. I showed them the footage, filed a trespassing report, and gave them the time-stamped video proof. The deputy who took my statement, a tall man with a weathered face, leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "She's got guts, I'll give her that," he said. "But she's also got priors, at least on file for harassment complaints." That was news to me. He shrugged. "You're not the first she's tried to intimidate. You're just the first who hit record." That night, I installed 2 more cameras, one aimed at the road, one on the roofline for a wide-angle view. I wasn't taking chances, and it was a good thing I didn't. Because the next evening, while I was reviewing footage, a strange car appeared in the feed. Unmarked, black, tinted windows. It parked across from my driveway. At first, I thought it might be a patrol car, but just sat there for hours. Then, around midnight, it drove off. The following morning, another envelope appeared. No return address. Just one line inside, typed in bold. "Stop filming, or we'll make you stop." Mason came over that evening. We sat on the porch, coffee steaming in the cold air. "She's escalating," he said. "And whoever that guy was, she's using him to scare you. You need to file for a restraining order." "I already did," I said, showing him the paperwork. "But I'm tired of playing defense." Mason arched an eyebrow. "You're not planning something stupid, are you?" I smiled faintly. "No, just strategic. Because while Karen was busy trying to scare me, I've been busy too, digging deeper into her little empire. Public records are beautiful things if you know where to look." Turns out, Karen's husband Derek wasn't just a city contractor. He was the signatory for multiple HOA maintenance contracts. Contracts that, on paper, were worth tens of thousands of dollars for landscape improvements. But the photos from those addresses told a different story. Weeds, broken fences, no work done, fake invoices, false reports, classic kickback loop. By the time Mason and I finished connecting the dots, we were looking at years of quiet embezzlement, hidden right under everyone's noses. "Holy hell," Mason whispered. "You just found her Achilles heel." "No," I said, staring at the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop. "I found her detonator." Saturday morning, I drove straight to the county attorney's office and handed everything over. The footage, the invoices, the contract numbers. I didn't need revenge anymore. I wanted justice. And the thing about justice? It moves slow, but it moves hard. Within 2 weeks, Karen's world started to crumble. Investigators showed up at her house. Derek's city badge was revoked pending inquiry. Neighbors started whispering again, not about me this time, but about her. She vanished from the neighborhood meetings, her SUV missing from the driveway. Her name disappeared from the HOA website entirely. But there was one last scene left in this saga, one I didn't see coming. Late one night, around 2 a.m., there was a knock on my door. Not a pounding one, soft, almost hesitant. I opened it, and there she was. Karen Blake. No makeup, no pearls, no armor. Her eyes were red, her voice shaking. "You destroyed me." I said nothing. She took a step closer, desperate now. "You think this makes you better than me? You think you're some kind of hero?" I exhaled slowly. "No, Karen. I just got tired of pretending people like you couldn't be stopped." She stared at me for a long moment, then whispered, "You'll regret this," and walked away into the dark. That was the last time I ever saw her. The next morning, the sheriff's office confirmed she and Derek were both under investigation for fraud and property tampering. Mason texted me one line. "Sometimes karma just needs a push." I looked out on my lawn, the same patch of grass that started it all, and smiled. The fence line stood clean, untouched, perfectly still. The war was over. But the lesson? That would last. When people talk about karma, they make it sound instant, like a lightning strike. But the truth is, karma moves quietly, like groundwater. You don't see it coming until it rises beneath your feet and swallows everything built on lies. By mid-March, that's exactly what was happening to Karen. The county audit went public. Turns out, she and Derek had been running a double billing scheme for years, inflating HOA maintenance budgets, charging for phantom contractors, and routing payments to shell companies. The total, over $40,000 in misused funds. When the story hit the local news, the headline was brutal. Maple Creek HOA president under investigation for fraud and property tampering. Her photo was everywhere. That same smug smile she used to wear at board meetings now frozen under the word suspended. Neighbors who once bowed to her couldn't even meet her eyes. The day the police came to seize her files, the whole street went silent. Curtains fluttered, phones recorded from behind blinds. Derek tried to act calm, but his voice cracked when the detectives started boxing up documents. I watched from my porch with my coffee, just like always. Only this time, I didn't feel angry. Just finished. Sarah, my next-door neighbor, came over later that afternoon, leaning against the porch rail. "You know," she said, "you didn't just win. You changed this place. Everyone's been talking." "About me?" I asked. "About boundaries," she said, smiling. "About standing up when someone tries to bulldoze you." That night, I sat in my living room, watching the evening news replay the footage I'd handed over. Karen yelling, me calm, the truth on display. The anchor's voice called it a community reckoning. I called it closure. But closure has a strange sound when you've lived under pressure for so long. It's quiet, too quiet. The next morning, the HOA formally disbanded. The board dissolved, the bylaws suspended pending reformation. It was over. Except, of course, for the small matter of Karen's last act of defiance. That came in the form of a letter. Handwritten, shaky. No threats this time. Just 5 words. "You took my power away." I read it twice, folded it, and tucked it into my drawer. Not out of sentiment, out of reminder. Power isn't something people give you. It's something you stop letting them take. 3 months later, Maple Creek looked like a new town. No more fines for lawn height. No more inspections disguised as intimidation. People actually waved again. Real smiles, not the tight, HOA-approved ones. The board that replaced hers was volunteer-based, transparent, and neighborly in the way things should have been all along. And me? I finally had peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't need cameras or folders full of evidence. Just trust and space to breathe. But I'll admit, sometimes when I check my security feed, I half expect to see her silhouette again. Old habits die hard. Instead, all I see now are kids running through sprinklers, dogs chasing each other down sidewalks, neighbors laughing over barbecue smoke. The kind of normal that used to feel impossible. One evening, while trimming the hedges near my fence line, I found something small and half-buried, a pearl earring dulled with dirt. I knew whose it was. For a second, I considered tossing it. Instead, I placed it on the post she'd once stepped over. Let the rain have it. Let the earth keep it. That night, I poured a drink, sat by the pool, and thought about how fast things can change when you refuse to stay quiet. Mason called. They charged her, he said. Fraud, trespassing, falsifying property records. Derek, too. Probation, fines, restitution. It's all done. I didn't cheer, didn't gloat, just nodded. Good. Feels strange, doesn't it? He said. Winning without wanting to celebrate. Yeah, I said, because it was never about winning. It was about stopping her. He laughed softly. That's what makes it a win, my friend. Weeks passed, and life found rhythm again. The roses Sarah planted along the fence finally bloomed, thick, red, defiant. She called them boundary keepers. When new families moved in, they asked about the story. I'd smile, wave toward the fence, and just say, long story short, respect your lines. And every once in a while, when I scroll through my old footage, I stop on one particular frame. The moment Karen's face changes from power to realization. That split second where arrogance meets consequence. That's the moment I remember what all this was for. Because truth doesn't roar. It just endures. Now, if you've been listening this far, maybe you've had your own Karen, someone who crossed a line and expected silence in return. Here's what I learned. You don't fight them with rage. You fight them with receipts, with calm, with patience. Because the loudest person in the room usually isn't the strongest. The one with proof is. So if you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and share your story. Tell me in the comments, what's the boundary you had to protect? Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. It just wears persistence. And when people like Karen forget that, when they think they can walk over anyone, anytime, the truth will always be there, waiting, patient, and unblinking. Watching, recording, remembering. The day her house finally sold, I saw the moving truck pull out of Maple Creek for the last time. The new family waved at me. Kind smiles, easy laughter. I waved back, feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Closure. Real, earned closure. As the sun set, its light glinting off the post she once stepped over like it was hers, I raised my glass and whispered to boundaries and the quiet satisfaction of keeping them. The camera light blinked once. Not in warning this time, but in peace. And for the first time since this all began, I turned it off. Because some stories don't need to be recorded anymore. They just need to be remembered.